Hello, welcome to another episode of Like It Is. I'm your host, R. Page. Today we're going to explore the conditions within urban communities, such as the Flint water crisis, as well as other conditions routinely endured by America's poor and disenfranchised citizens. Toxic Poor will address why such conditions often exist within America's poor communities, along with addressing what solutions must be explored to eliminate the toxic environments in which many poor and lower socioeconomic communities are forced to endure. Today, with support from our esteemed guest panelists, influential members of our communities in their own right, we'll begin to understand the real cause of the Flint water crisis, as well as discuss when Black lives will really matter, and whether the 8,000 plus children under 6 years of age living in Flint in the contaminated water areas can be considered unwitting participants of a modern-day Tuskegee experiment. Find out next. This is Like It Is.
We're not talking about getting high. We're talking about medicinal medicine and alternative medicine that can help.
Okay, so now we're talking about striking straight.
For those who can't read, and on the other side of that, expect to have a $50,000 a year job.
I know for sure that this guy stole something because it's right here in black and white.
I don't feel like going to beg for human dignity to be treated like I just fell off a turnip truck somewhere.
Ain't no reason in this world why you should be having any child out here at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and they're 15, 12, 13 years old. What happened to society?
Welcome back. Today we're talking about our nation's toxic poor and what measures must be addressed to mitigate this condition from our communities. To offer insight on your questions and commentary, I'm honored to welcome our esteemed guest to our show today. Today we're joined by Pastor Keith Collins, former police officer and senior pastor of the Church of the Overcomer, located in Trainer, Pennsylvania, and Pastor Curtis Morris, senior pastor of Bethany Baptist Church in Chester, Pennsylvania. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Now, as we get into this conversation and we talk about Flint and other conditions that impact poor people, in your opinions, and let me start with Pastor Collins, what's going on in our communities today?
Well, it's a simple answer and it's a complicated answer. The simple answer is I believe there's always been an agenda to marginalize those that are considered the underclass or those that are considered the exploitable or expendable people, and that includes primarily black and brown people. But it's complicated because as we have the emergence of black leadership and black political class that are complicit with the dominant culture, then that complicates the issue. But for many years, people have said water will be used as a weapon, food will be used as a weapon. We have food deserts, we have environmental waste sites, particularly in Chester area where we serve. So it is a combination of black political class now, including in Flint, where there was a black mayor, and there are black leaders on the ground who could have been more vigorous in dealing with this situation. So, but I do believe it is a larger grand scheme to either move people along to clear out an area for gentrification, clear out an area for repopulation, as well as getting rid of whole swaths of people.
Now, Pastor Morris, when I look at the Flint situation, a lot of people don't realize this whole thing started back in 2010, and it wasn't declared a federal emergency until late January or late December 2015. What are your thoughts on that? Why are poor people disenfranchised? Why don't they have a voice?
Well, one is there needs to be a disposable population. I guess there's a people in power and there's people who have a plan to eliminate masses of individuals. It really starts back to really Dred Scott, where poor people really have no rights that those who have power to even look upon. And so we want to eliminate a large number of people. We need a permanent underclass, and so it's always going to be on the backs of black people and poor white people. Poor white people just don't know that they're part of the process. I've been to Flint, Michigan, and Flint, Michigan was a great industrial city. William Julius Thomas wrote this book when Jobs went away. Deindustrialization, they sent in the jobs overseas because they want to bust the unions. We don't want people working wages. We want to keep a permanent poor. And so henceforth, that population of Flint, which is 90% Democrat, 60% black, the other 30% are poor white, they really don't matter.
Does the Flint situation, in your opinions, bring into question American values? If you look at surrounding communities in Flint, I used to live in Michigan, so when I look at Bloomfield Hills and other more affluent communities, I mean, for this situation to have began in 2010 with a lot of poor decisions up through the governor's office and have it played out to a point where a federal emergency disaster was declared in Michigan, what's going on there? Do you feel like that this is an American values question?
Sure, and as I alluded to earlier, it's complicated, it's simple, but it's complicated because Governor Granholm, who was the governor who signed the law in place that set up the emergency management takeover system, she was a Democrat, and everybody was in love with her, but she snuck that in while people weren't really challenging her, holding her feet to the fire. So we have to check everyone. You can't just say because I'm black or I'm poor, I'm with the Democrats or I'm with the Republicans. You have to be for what's right. When what's right, what's going to give you a quality of life. So she signed that bill into law, and because of that, that paved the way for something like a Flint to happen. Where we are in Chester. Chester was the environmental dump capital of the country, but it wasn't a politician who dealt with that. It was Dr. Horace Strand. It was another pastor, and I give him kudos. He fought and fought and fought to get the Chester Environmental Partnership. So it's going to take grassroots people to deal with that whole strip on 291 in Chester, and they're still there, but they're being mitigated, and he's still fighting to get those people rehoused and to get them some benefits for all the toxic exposure that they've had. So this is an ongoing policy that's generations long.
American values is rooted in dollars and cents. It's not complicated. American system is based upon those who have and those who have not. And capitalism, basically, you want to maximize profit at the cost of human life. Our country, Kennedy talking about a kind of general nation. You don't even hear in the political landscape from the Republicans or Democrats, nobody even talks about the poor. It's the rich and the middle class. Poor people are expendable in this nation, and that's a value issue that I don't believe that the forefathers of this nation really had in mind.
That's a great point. So when we talk about whether it's Flint, whether it's Philadelphia, whether it's Chester, Pennsylvania, what are some of the strategies that those who are considered disenfranchised, how do they begin to take control as opposed to be the recipients of bad decisions? Just kind of walk us through that process. We have clergy members who are involved. We have legal representation at times that really champions the causes for, lower socioeconomic communities and the citizens who live there. But what ownership can lower socioeconomic citizens, what can they take upon themselves to change that game?
Well, I think it has to go back to the grassroots, people like Fannie Lou Hamer. She was inarticulate by today's standards, but she mobilized 64,000 black people in the 60s to start the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party because the Democratic Party would not even seat them at the convention. So when we decide to come out of, and if I could use this without being verbally, castigated, off the plantation, whether it's a Democratic plantation, Republican plantation, and just decide to be free. It has to be a grassroots movement because right now, even though the rhetoric might be slightly different, when it comes to the economic agenda, they meet in the middle.
But Pastor Collins, let me interject here. When you say get off the plantation, I understand.
In other words, where your vote is just taken for granted.
Okay.
And that's what happens. Your vote is already counted for. So therefore, we have to come up with a new strategy to challenge that. And that's when things change.
If I go back to, and I'm going to let Pastor Morris handle this question, but if you go back to the Civil Rights Movement, where there was a recognized leader, if you will, championing the causes of minorities and the poor and disenfranchised within society, by and large, that doesn't exist today. And to get involved at a grassroots level, that requires organization. So now if I'm, a early 20-something young man in the community and I don't like what's happening, it's natural to think I'm going to look for leadership. How do I, do I go to church? Do I go to the
Okay.
police station? Where do I begin? I mean, certainly self-education. I can, today I can go to Google, right?
Right.
but if I don't have that level of enlightenment, how do I get involved?
Well, I believe the first place that community starts is home. And one of the issues that we struggle with in the urban community and the so-called subculture is the decimation of the black family. Somewhere between 74 and 80% of our families are held up by single parents. Big issue is teaching our children economics, entrepreneurship, self-help. There will be no Calvary to come in to save the black community. We've been waiting for white America to save the black community since we've been here, and that's not going to happen. It's going to have to be a nation within a nation. We're going to have to learn to mobilize our resources that we have. We spend something close to $1 trillion in stuff that we really don't need. We have to begin to re-educate our people about their resources and coming together collectively, economically. Economics, in the words of Wu-Tang, cash rules everything around.
Cream.
If you don't have any dollars and resources, we're going to continue to be in this thing where we have to go to look for somebody else. Look at our communities. We have no stores. We have no businesses. We don't want to support our businesses. We have to teach our children entrepreneurship. The whole ideal of Frederick Douglass's Booker T. Washington in terms of everybody should be a PhD in economics. We need both. We need educated people with STEM, and we also need some people that can fix stuff up. We can't afford to keep our communities up because people from the outside charge us exorbitant prices. When we grew up, the man down the street was an electrician. He was a plumber. We trade together. We got to get our kids back into trade, and our older men who know this stuff got to teach our younger people, but it starts with the family.
Yeah.
We talk about many people come up in poor communities and manage to acquire a great education. And one of the challenges you often hear is that they leave and that they pursue prosperity on a different level. And those conditions that exist within the community, from their perspective, they no longer identify with that, right? I've got my great job, my corporate salary, my nice car, those things that I could not afford, and I was part of that community, through, various educational grants and how they've been able to leverage the system to better themselves, they move on. How can we get those people who know the community, they grew up there, how do we get those people to come back and bring those leadership skills and apply that education within the community to help to transform the community long term?
Well, one of the things, as Pastor Morris was saying, we have to begin to develop our own economic engines. We have to begin when we get the education, or whether it's a plumber or a carpenter, or whether it's a lawyer, or whether it's a technician, to use that not just to have a good career or job, but now to come back and say, I'm going to start a process where in a few years, I'm going to turn this into a business, okay? I'm going to begin to become a consultant. I'm going to begin to have my own business. So young men, like the young man that's in the audience today, can have something to be a part of. Every other racialized ethnic group that came into this country, they use collective economics. When they got their foot in the door, they brought everybody else along with them. That's why the Irish, the Italians, the Jewish, the Asians now, we are the only group that have not done that. We disperse our money, we disperse our talent, and therefore we don't have a real bargaining chip.
But why not? Pastor Morris, why not? Why haven't we, you're right, there are great examples out there. There's other cultures that have come to, this society. And to your point, they create small businesses. They lend money to other members of that community so they can create small businesses. And they start to revitalize themselves economically right there within their communities. And you talked about slavery a little while earlier. So to Pastor Morris, why do other cultures get it right and we seem to struggle? A lot of people will say, okay, so slavery, we can talk about slavery all day, just like the Jews can talk about the Holocaust. But now they're running Hollywood and we're getting run out of town.
Well,
I mean, why is that?
We have two things going against us. One is internal, one is external. One's internal, one is external. The external forces is that we have media that's created us as monsters and unreliable, and so most of us, we have taught to mistrust one another. So that's external, and that's constantly bombarded. When you see media images of African Americans, what you see is, you see thugs, drug dealers, hustlers, pimps, angry black women. You never see, you don't see any more Cosbys. And so what you see more is divas. And so they look at us, so we already are frowned upon from the outside that we are a mess. And then we have to deal with the fact that our skin color. See, an Irish guy can go into a bank, and a Polish guy can go into a bank. His skin color helps him. The fact that we have dark hue, we're everybody's enemy. We're everybody's enemy. And so that keeps us down. And then our internal issues. We come from a place called Africa where it was 1,400 tribes. And so we're tribal by nature. So we're a small group. So we stay in our own little group, and we kind of hang together. And so we don't know how to break outside our own little groups. In Philadelphia, when I grew up, there was 114 gangs in a small area. And my little gang against your little gang, until we become we are cognitively underdeveloped because we lock ourselves within our own community. Until we get a broader perspective, it'll be difficult for us to come together.
Do I make a point?
Yeah, final thought before we go to break.
Okay, real quick. And the other thing is, we have to each do our own individual part. Like today, I'm here, but I have about 6 black contractors working on my home. Okay, I have thousands of dollars worth of work. Every time somebody works on my home, I make sure everything within me that is somebody that looks like me. Okay, if you go to, if you put your money in the black bank, if you buy a car, go to a black store. So we have to begin on where we can, not more dollars, but consciously make that effort to spend that money, because that is building up that economy and our community, and they're going to be the ones to hire our young people as they become more prosperous. The other cultures aren't going to hire our young people. So we have to begin to break that barrier that the pastor's sharing about and begin to use our own people.
So we're going to come back to that point. Listen, I want to remind our viewers, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We're going to be right back. This is a great conversation. We're going to get right back into Like It Is when we return. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Like It Is. I'm your host, R. Page Smith. Before we went to break, we were talking about how individuals within the black community or within lower economic communities can take greater control of their destiny financially. As Pastor Morris said, Kareem, cash rules everything around me. Dollar bill, y'all. So let's go back to that. As we look at other communities and how they invest in themselves, what are some of the challenges that have historically existed within the African American community and poor communities? And let's talk about the trust issue, because that's a factor.
Well, the trust issue is a factor. I mean, we are known as the most spiritual, the most quote unquote religious community in the nation. We can build a church, we can start a church, but we don't start businesses at anywhere near the rate that we start churches. So if every church or clergy person would commit to either supporting, defining certain businesses in their community that they direct their parishioners to support, or starting incubators, economic incubators, that would be a great step. Then we have to understand return on investment, okay? Right now, there are other cultures. We always had a market on the barbershops and the beauty shops, but now other cultures are coming into our community, cutting our hair, doing these other things, and we're supporting them because there's $5, it's less. So we have to understand, yes, it's less now, but it's going to be more, but also you are eventually going to put out of business someone that had a small business. And we're the only culture that doesn't see that return on investment. So we have to start thinking like that and become more progressive and directing our people. This is what we've done at Church of Overcome. We don't have a whole lot of people, but we use these economic incubators and we funnel people to give them economic opportunities. And my wife and I have also started the business there where we can bring young people in to let them, number one, have some confidence, and number two, have a chance to get into the business world.
So Pastor Morris, if I think about Avenue of the States, if I go into Chester, and there's a number of hair care suppliers, and they're either Korean owned or Chinese owned, and there's a belief system, whether it's mythical or whether it's fact, that they come into this country and they get all kinds of breaks and incentives to establish businesses, and that's why those businesses go to those cultures versus within the African American community. Is that myth or fact?
Some of it is myth and some of it is fact. Some of the people who come to this country get better opportunities again on loans and grants. Again, my skin color is a detriment to banks. They overcharge us in housing, they overcharge us in, everything we do, we have to deal with that issue. So, and then again, we have to learn what to do with wealth. A lot of times our dollars and cents are spent on, again, stuff that we don't need. My mother used to say, we pay for what we want and beg for what we need. So we have to learn to be more, I guess, more frugal in terms of not becoming what we call, Du Bois said, eaters and wearers. We eat and buy what they say. So we have to learn to discipline ourselves to take dollars and cents and not do this. We'll buy a $400 pocketbook and we got $40. That makes no sense. How about a $40 pocketbook and put $400 in it? So our priorities have to move because unfortunately, some of us in the quote unquote subculture, if we buy something or get something that gives us so-called status. So we have to understand dollars and cents, not buying stuff, not being renters, but buyers. When I deal with the guys on the corner, they say, this is my corner, this is my block. It's not your block. That's public housing. We need to take those dollars and cents and invest in properties. Even if you have to buy a broken down property and invest it and build it up. Right. We have to begin to start with our children, with our young people about economics and buying. And we need to teach our children, you don't have to go get a job, you have to get a business. College education is nice, but my degree says this is how much I make. I get a trade to say this is what I'm worth. And that goes back to what happened to our school systems. They took away a whole bunch of the trades. And so the trades are out of our hand. Our kids can't do plumbing, electricity. Now with STEM, we need to invest in those things that are futuristic. And it doesn't matter whether you live in a project or you're middle class. Some of these plumbing and electricity is some things that God gives you and gives you. So we need to become more diverse in our economic portfolio.
So it's interesting how this conversation begins to come full circle, and it comes back to education. And as Pastor Marks likes to say on Sunday morning, you'll get that on the way home. But listen, I want to go to the audience here for questions. Audience, any questions for our panelists?
One question.
Why don't you come up here with me, sir? And then state your name and tell us where you're from. I'm going to bring you right up here on camera so we can see how handsome you are. We're related, right? We're related. Are we cousins? All right.
Well, my question is, today it's Flint, Michigan. Tomorrow it can be Chester, Pennsylvania. What can we do as citizens of our community to prevent this from happening to us?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I would respond to that by saying, making a statement first, which is, it's better to be respected than it is to be liked. We have grown up in this culture where, because we've been so oppressed, suppressed, when we get around the dominant culture, we want them to like us, shake our hand, the politicians come around, we want to be liked. But when we decide we want respect, every other subgroup in this country is respected. And they're respected because they develop their own economy, they develop their own priorities, they push their own issues. They don't wait on a party or an ideologue to push the issues. They say, this is what we want. So to keep it from going to Chester or any other community, the people in those regions and in those communities have to decide, we're here now to be respected. We're going to get grassroots leaders that don't have these strong ties to the dominant culture or to the political class, but that they can always not only speak truth to power, but that they can have power to tell the truth.
All right.
And you can't do that if you're on somebody's payroll.
Well, if you're not on anybody's payroll, you can't do anything.
Well, you have your own payroll, yeah. If you have, you create your own dollars, yeah.
But we need to do more than just be respected. Respect is one thing, but getting things done is something else. We're talking about really getting things done.
In the political realm, and you know that as well, that boo-boo was political. And it continues to be political boo-boos. We need politicians that's willing to speak to the dominant culture and demand. One of the things we have to do in terms of the community, organize, and our politicians that we vote for, that we put in office, they're responsible. And we need to begin to bargain with them and say, if you can't protect us, then we can't vote for you. We can't have this perpetual cycle of politicians being in because we like them. That issue in Flint, that mayor more likely was in bed with the government, the politicians. Her foot needs to be held to the fire in terms of, there's a thing called election time. And that's the one power we do have with the ballot, but we have to get our people out to vote and be willing to deal with those tough, hard issues. You're talking about poisoning people. You're talking about people's lives and children and future. Those kind of issues must be dealt with on a political level. And you know, we have a small voice in the political arena when we don't play our chess right. If you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, if you can help me, then you need to help me. And so sometimes we are loyal to people who are not reciprocating.
All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, thank you.
Brother Page, I think that we have to decide to work with people as we're saying, that are going to speak to our concerns, regardless of where they are. Personally, I'm a part of the Millions More Conscious Black Voters Movement, which is a movement of independent political people that we come together to address whatever politician it is, to say these are the issues that we're concerned about. Just like if you go to a car dealer and you don't feel you're being treated right, when you walk out the door, you got their undivided attention.
That's correct.
And that's what has to happen on a larger scale with urban communities, and particularly Black and brown people.
That's Mark.
One of the things that we're really fighting against also is that it's a bigger scheme. It's a larger scheme. We're dealing with a situation where there needs to be an elimination of a certain number of people. And by any means necessary, they have taken towards getting the subculture. Before we can address the present-day problems, let's look at the historical analysis. 1619, we were fine. We were fine up until the Emancipation Proclamation. And so 150 years ago, we worked for free. And now that we have to work for something, there's not a whole lot of need to protect a class of people that they really don't want to be here. As you heard me share over and over time again, I said, they did not bring you here to be a judge. And so as we progress that, there's a faction in this country that wants to eliminate us. And I'll give you an example. After the Emancipation Proclamation, there was a group of people called the Eugenics Society. The Eugenics Society decided that, in fact, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes quoted that after 3 generations of these morons and imbeciles, we have no more use for them. And so there's an underlying reality that we want to eliminate a lot of Afro-Americans. And so they created a thing called the Eugenics Society. And the Eugenics Society there was forced sterilization of Afro-American women, the Tuskegee syphilis reality. This is no new stuff here. This is historical analysis. Then you add on top of that, when Adolf Hitler used the eugenics as reality to get rid of, and not the Jews, the Eugenics Society was embarrassed. So they shut down the eugenics, and they created a new one called Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is where 94% of all the abortion clinics in minority communities were Hispanics and Blacks. New York City, 6 out of 10 births are ended in abortion. Roe versus Wade, since there have been 55 million abortions, 38% have been to Afro-Americans. So we need to get rid of them. And then to add that.
44%?
38%.
38%.
Since 1974, Roe versus Wade. Now we have, because here's the reality, in 1979, 38.6% of all Afro-American males were enrolled in college. Well, then you had the great emancipator, Ronald Reagan. At the same time, when the jobs went away, in New York City, 562,000 manufacturing jobs left, Philadelphia, 162,000.
So let me interject here, because I want to talk about that for a minute, because there's a component that I think it's important that we discuss, and I want our audience to think about this before we get to our next question. Trickle-down disenfranchisement. Okay, what is that? The United States of America currently prohibits approximately 5 million people, and you talked about this, from voting. And the reason they prohibit 5 million people from voting is because they're felons. And many African-American males have felony convictions due to the quote-unquote war on drugs, right? So there's a system that's going on here, right? There's a system that's going on here. It's systemic disenfranchisement. One of the things that we talk about as African-American men in the barbershop all the time is it's by design. Let's address that.
Absolutely. This ideal of the war on drugs. The war on drugs, it was amazing. The war on drugs was started at the same time Noriega and Reagan got together in the Contras, and they supplied the drugs. The drug money supplied the war against the Contras. At the same time, they said, let's start privatization of prison, the mass incarceration of Afro-American males. At the same time, they disfranchised most of our urban schools. Then they flooded our communities with Section 8 to have single parents. At the same time, all of a sudden you saw crack cocaine in our country, in our city, which came from Colombia and Bolivia, and none of the people in our neighborhood had a passport. At the same time, you saw Soviet-made weapons that dropped in our community. Now you have submachine guns in our community. At the same time, the marijuana laws and the crack cocaine laws, which locked up our boys an excessive amount of time. I remember when one of our new judges became a judge, they gave a guy bail, excessive bail. This guy had a $50,000 bail for less than a gram of marijuana. They knew he couldn't get out, so they keep him locked in the penitentiary. These realities are real in the black community. Mass incarceration, the jobs went away, breakdown of the family situation, drugs and gun put in our neighborhood, and all of a sudden you want to lock us all up. But in 1979, 38% of us went to college. Same time, they stopped the Pell Grants and the BOG grants. Because too many of us was becoming Judge Davises and people like you, and we can't have that. And here's the big screen. This whole Donald Trump reality, listen, we had one minority as president, we sure ain't gonna have another one. And until we deal with that reality as Afro-Americans and wake up from this reality of American dream, which is a really American nightmare, then we'll begin to work close together, because regardless of how middle class you become, they still want to get rid of you. And so I believe that the situation is a lot larger of our systems in terms of economics, why we have such a hard way to go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
America has always been a caste system. Even if you go back to the colonial era, it was always the gilded, the gentry. They were the ones, the landowners that voted. Then they came up with this whole concept of they were going to extend the franchise. But there's always been a movement to minimize the people that vote, even whites that vote, because they understand the power of that vote. So therefore, that's always going to be there. But the people that are out there, the people that are the grassroots, have to understand that, because no matter if the major parties only want a certain amount of people voting so they can maintain the status quo. Now, as far as the nation goes, we've always had this concept that there must be an undercut, because race was a social construct. There was no such thing as black or white up until about the late 16th century, because we had indentured servants that were both black and white. We had slaves that were black and white, and then they actually lived in harmony. And the powers that be, the gilded class, realized, hey, these people might come together, and we will no longer be the elite. So therefore, they came up with the structure of race. So even if you go to the poorest white community, as people like Johnson has said, if you tell the poorest white person you'll be better than the best black person, you'll have them for life. So we have this construct now that is as old as America of race and the caste system, and we're constantly butting heads with that construct, because that's who America really is.
So folks, you're getting education here today on Like It Is. So when we come back, we're going to talk about education. We're also going to talk about, when I talk about trickle-down disenfranchisement, we're going to talk about the impact on the family, we're going to talk about the impact on the black community, and we're going to focus a little bit more on education and what this combustible mix often produces within poor and socioeconomic communities. We're talking about being toxic poor on Like It Is. I'm your host, R. Page. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Like It Is. I'm R. Page Smith. We're here with Pastor Keith Collins and Pastor Curtis Morris. We're talking about overcoming conditions that result in becoming toxic poor. Before we went to the break, we were talking about education and the trickle-down disenfranchisement of many within poor communities, how laws that are associated with the war on drugs and other laws, many young men and women from poor communities, whether we like it or whether we don't like it, truth is they have to survive economically. Many make bad choices and choose the drug trade. They go away for many years for small quantities of marijuana and what have you. And it effectively removes these individuals from the community. That has a tremendous impact on the African American household. So one of the things we want to talk about is when you're raising the next generation, and the importance of having a male role model in the home is now gone, justified or unjustified. That also has an impact. I'm going to start with Pastor Morris. I'm going to start with Pastor Collins this time as we explore that dynamic.
Okay, well, we do know that this phenomenon is real about the single parent phenomenon. And that's really where the community-based groups, the faith-based groups, whether it's the church, the mosque, or another group, comes into play. That's the role that we have to play, where we begin to embrace these young men and welcome them in and give them opportunities to get not only mentoring and modeling, but also to prepare for their future as adults. So we can tell them not just go to school, stay in school, but we're going to help you through this process. And one of the fantasies that I have is that every church will begin to adopt these young people, men and women. There are a lot of young ladies that are in single parent homes as well. So one of the things I can just say that we did, we purchased 3 properties that we use as housing, emergency housing or distressed housing. And we've even had young people, not just returning citizens, but young people that had a chance to be the first generation to go to college, et cetera, stay there in a safe place while they were getting their footing in our culture. So I think that those of us that are leaders can begin to do some of those things, concrete things, to get, because if you don't have stable, if you're housing, if you don't have a stable influence, then you're not going to be able to make your mark in society. It's just not going to happen.
So I'm going to take a step back, because in many of these situations, you know, this challenge is often generational. Mm-hmm. You see fathers in prison, you see their sons in prison, you see their brothers in prison. It becomes generational, okay? And that often leaves behind young ladies who have to raise boys into manhood without that guidance. So the issues when we talk about being toxic poor and having a voice within the community, you know, one of the things that we're going to get into a little later, time permitting, is, you know, how do you become a community activist? What are the challenges and risks associated with that? But when you look at the generational side of trickle-down disenfranchisement, Pastor Morris, share with us your thoughts on that and how to overcome that.
That is a serious issue. Normally, most of the inmates come from inmates. Most folk who end up addicted comes from a family of addiction. It's systemic because there is no basis there. And the church and the mosque and the faith-based community has to take a part in that. But one of the things that I'm not sure if it's going to be successful, Mayor Kenny, we have to teach children parenting early. Mm-hmm. One of the things that when I worked for the Department of Human Services, Mayor's Commission on Family years ago in Philadelphia, we proposed teaching parenting as a curriculum in the public school system. Most of our kids, they have children at 16, 17 years old, and what happens is they're still children. They don't know how to raise children. They move on, and another generation. It just goes on and on. She's 16, by the time she's 28, when she gets it together, the child's 12. The child doesn't know how to read at that point. The child's special ed, the child's already on medication. So this cycle just repeats itself. They don't understand the reality of what it is to raise a child, and because they had not seen an example. So they're more like the victim. And so, you know, we do a thing at our church called Jump. Jesus understands my problem with young teenage Afro-American women, and we're training them with older women. It's a biblical model, Titus, the older women, temperate, so we teach the younger women. We have a boys to men, the responsibility, what it is to be a parent. Hopefully we can stem the tide of these teenage and these pregnancies that are unplanned, sporadic children that's all over the place. And we know in the city of Chester, we have men, we have 10, 11 different children, and they're not taking care of them, and these children are left to be, flowers are cultivated, weeds grow. So they grow wild, and it just continues to perpetuate itself. So you have to deal with it from the root. It's easier to help build a child than repair a broken man.
You know, one of the things that, before I know we have a couple of questions from audience members, but I want to shift the topic a little bit to becoming a community activist and what are the risks and rewards associated with that. Death threats, physical attacks, arbitrary arrests, you know, these are the human rights defenders and what they face when they make that decision to become a community advocate and champion the rights for those who cannot champion those rights for themselves. What comes to mind, in my mind, is watching what Dr. King and others went through in the 60s with the dogs and the water hoses, et cetera. Now, they were committed to nonviolence, okay? Today's environment, today's average young man, I'd say ages 18 to 30, you know, was raised in the area where, as Public Enemy said, don't believe the hype. And you're not gonna physically confront that young man without equally getting a response. So as we teach the tools of becoming a community activist, for those folks that are empowered to do so and really be of assistance to their communities, what is some of the education, what is some of the training that goes into that process? I would assume, as I talk about Dr. King, and you gentlemen yourselves probably have been in situations where you've led the charge within the community and seen the police response, et cetera. How do you teach that?
Okay.
As well as self-control and management, so that what you are championing, you're effective in getting that message across?
Well, you know, regarding myself and Church Overcomer, I kind of became an activist because of our own situation where we had to battle with Delaware County for 10 years, and then so many things that came to me with the school district and how the miseducation of our children and just mistreatment. And my good friend Michael Cord, who's not here today, he shared something. He said a quote some time ago. He said, most attorneys are misery merchants. They're not agents of social change or engagement. So number one, you have to take up this as a mantle. You have to understand that for me as a pastor.
What's a misery merchant?
A misery merchant is a lawyer who just goes out there to profit off of other people's suffering, versus a person who's committed to social change, like a Hamilton Houston and other lawyers, Brian Stevenson today, who's out there actually creating, confronting the judicial system, because it's not broken, it's doing what it was designed to do. We have to confront that. So we need to partner with people like, we need good lawyers that are not misery merchants, but that are committed to the people. We need to educate the people the fact that this is a process. We don't just do one demonstration or go to court one time. You know, I went to court for 10 years. I've led other charges and I explained to people, justice is not swift. We're taught that in school. You don't even always get a chance to confront your accusers because they have protections that you don't have. So we need to learn that this is a process. It's not going to be easy, but you have to be committed to the fight. You have to organize, because a well-organized lie will always defeat disorganized truth. So we have to understand what we're going into. We're going into the belly of the beast, and this is for the long haul. It's not about a photo op. It's not about coming out to blow off steam. But after we do that, we have to strategize and see be prepared to file lawsuits, be prepared to have to bail people out, be prepared to have confrontation, particularly in a place like where we are in Delaware County that has a history of opposition to just the enfranchisement and dignity of certain classes of people. So it is not just a one-shot deal.
Pastor Marsh, your thoughts?
Activism is life. If you are, people hear me say, I'm living while black. As long as I'm black, I'm an activist. Everywhere I go, I'm an activist, because I'm considered the enemy. When I walk in the store, I'm a black man. Whatever I do, I'm a black man. I'm in the land of my oppressor, and I understand that. So we have to have multiple strategies. We can't have one way of dealing with an enemy that is so great. And so I coach football, and you have to have a game plan. You have to have a game plan, but football takes discipline, it takes order. So what I try to teach young men, you have to have self-discipline first. You have no control over how someone else is going to respond, but you have to within yourself. And anger is not bad when used properly. Be angry, but sin not. So you have to learn to funnel your anger into something that will have an outcome. I tell young men, I say, we play the game to win. And so what I'm saying in terms of the strategies that we have to deal with in this oppressive society, we have to find creative ways. Instead of being reactive, we have to be proactive, so that we're able to handle what we need to deal with instead of just blowing off steam. A march is nice, but you need more than a march. You need legislation, you need organization, you need economics. So we can't get into this one way of dealing with an enemy that's larger than what we are.
And one of the things that happened right now that's in front of everybody is the whole heroin issue, okay? As long as substance abuse was painted as a black and brown issue, it was stigmatized, demonized, dehumanized. But now that it has come out the closet, it is now overwhelmingly white, and in the suburbs, it's a health issue. You got Narcan, you got treatment now as opposed to incarceration. So that activism led to public policy change, and that's something that can happen in our community as well. But they got together, those suburbanites that got, because their children were now dying and they couldn't sweep it under the rug anymore. So they created this they changed the whole scenario of how we look at drugs now. So that's something that has to happen. And then we have to engage, as the pastor was saying, you got to go to the school board meetings, you got to go to the township meetings, you got to go to the city council meetings. You got to do that. You got to go to the court, go have court watch. You got to go to observe court cases to see what happens in the courtroom, so that when you go to courtroom, it's not your first time being in the courtroom. Those are simple things that we can do that don't cost money. It just has to make that investment of time, and we have to organize and have good leadership to make it happen.
To go with the heroin issue, you know why they made a big deal?
And I know we have a question. I want to bring up our audience member. Go ahead with your point. We'll bring up our audience member for your question as he's making his point.
In Bucks County, where the economics is average income, probably about $80,000 per income family. In 2 years, it was 87 heroin overdose deaths. This is why Narcan, this is why it was in Bucks County. If it would have been in Chester or North Philadelphia or Camden or East St. Louis or Compton, nobody would have paid any mind. Bucks County had 87 heroin overdoses in a 2-year period. I'm not talking about overdose deaths. In 2-year period. That's why it became an issue.
Okay, we're going to welcome you to step up here with me and state your name and your question.
Kim Morris. And my question is, how do we waken the sleeping giant? I feel like as African Americans, we are sleeping, and there's a sense of overwhelming apathy in our communities where we don't go to the town meetings, where there'll be a little bit of people at the educational board meetings. We don't come out for things where we can be educated on what's happening in our communities. And our kids, I'm an educator, they come to school and there's no sense of urgency. And so there's this overwhelming sense of apathy. And how do we, which our forefathers, our parents, there was so much more fire in them to do and to be activists. And what can we do to kind of like create that fire and ignite that fire within us so that we can have a movement that actually does produce some positive change?
Thank you. That's a deep question. How do we break the cycle? And there's a lot going on in the cycle. So, Pastor Collins, I'll start with you.
Well, it's systemic. It goes back to generations. The Bible talks about in Exodus the 3rd and 4th generation. God said He will curse those that have broken the commandments, but He will bless those that have kept the commandments unto the 3rd and 4th generation. So there has to be a declaration made that I am going to break this cycle. We have to begin to teach people this is a cycle. It can be broken. It's going to be a remnant that's going to decide I want to be a part of breaking this cycle. So whether it's a cycle of abuse or apathy, it is just that. It is a cycle. You have to make a declaration. You have to get that remnant. And then we have to invest in that remnant, and then that may ignite the larger majority. But if not, as long as that remnant stays together, we are planning for the future. What I call the Joshua generation, that's going to actually make a change and actually have conquest. So I think it starts within. You have to make a declaration. You have to have someone outside telling you you can make a declaration, whether it's the family abuse, apathy, addiction. There has to be a spiritual component that understands that this didn't start with me. I'm not the first person to be apathetic. This started a long time ago, but now I know it, and I can do something about it.
Right. That's Morris.
James Weldon Johnson, when he wrote the Negro National Anthem, he said, when God moves us and blesses us, let's not get drunk with the wine of the world. I think what's happened to us after with integration, after desegregation, we began to get some of the fruits of the labor of our foreparents, and we got drunk with the wine. And I think the current state should help sober us up. I think we got kind of got caught up in wow, we finally made it to the big times. We got our piece of the rock.
Like the Jeffersons.
Like the Jeffersons.
And we finally got a piece.
We got an iPhone.
And so, and then the reality was we got drunk with the wine in the world. We became more individualistic and less community. Until we come back to the idea of community. 6 out of 10 of our families in a divorce. You know, we got the economics. There's a lot of black money, but it's spent on insanity, on personal, individual. It's no longer about family, it's about me.
I was going to say, doesn't the money today trump family? I mean, that's the mentality,
Well,
right?
we have this thing, it's all about me.
Right.
And then the media helps portray that. You see shows like the Atlanta Housewives, and it's all about money, weaves and tight dresses and blings and cars and things and stuff. And so we want more of that than we want community. And so once I guess it takes maybe a generation or two of the emptiness of materialism, maybe then we'll come back to community, because we got drunk with stuff and then we forgot each other and we compete with each other. And the collateral damage are our families and our communities.
Very good.
Or perhaps one day the wealth is redirected to rehabilitation, because now the numbers outweigh the quote-unquote fascination with bling.
Yes.
We have another question?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Charles Thompson. I'm chairman of the trustee board at Bethany Baptist Church. I do a lot of projects, and I heard Pastor Collins say, all your money is spent with black contractors and black folks.
Not all, but
A lot of it. But I was wondering how we could better this and get the good contractors and try to have a pool among all the churches.
Okay.
If you have a good guy that does roofing, you know, and we put this around,
Beautiful.
put it out
Yeah.
among our community, among our churches, that would strengthen us and bring some money back to our
Beautiful.
neighborhood.
well, I think let's put together a directory.
Can I add to that
Yes.
question, though? Because that's a great question.
That's beautiful.
But also,
I'm excited already.
But also, when we hire black contractors, we got to talk about quality standards.
Sure, of course,
for
of course.
performance and
Of
delivery.
course,
'Cause I've
of
hired
course,
some black
of
contractors in my day, and had to go out and get a 9mm to get them to finish the job.
Well, we're gonna have that. We're gonna have that. We have that even with the dominant culture, and that's whole. Just like the black bank, people have I've been a stockholder of the black bank since it opens, but we have the critique. But we're also going to have those that do have expertise, and I think that's beautiful. And I think that even if it begins with us, Pastor, we could after today, I can give you a list of the people that I use. You can give people a list that you use. We can create a Facebook page or add it to our web pages and say this is a community directory.
Yes.
And let it begin. It's going to begin small and let it grow. But I just felt that.
With people that we can trust.
That we've already been vetted.
I don't want to send somebody.
No, these are people that have been vetted, that have done work. We know what kind of work they do.
I started a project in January, and no, it was before January, and I knew this black guy could do good work. So I said, man, when can you come look at my job? He said, tomorrow's election day, I'll be there Wednesday. I said, what time? He said, 10 o'clock. He said, but call me 8 o'clock to remind me to come. I knew that was a no-no right there.
Right, yeah.
Right there.
You're right, you're right.
But it's important.
I got to remind you to come get your money.
Come get your money.
Right.
And every time I do a job, a project, I want a good person that's responsible.
Okay.
And there are some good people
Yes.
in business, talented, the
Okay.
word means a lot. But we need to start a pool among the churches.
That's
Yes.
excellent.
Right. You know.
And let it begin with us, yes.
Excellent.
All right. So
Excellent
I'll
point.
do it.
Yes, and I'm going to get back with Pastor. I'm going to give him all
Thank
the
you.
people I know, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's beautiful.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
That's practical.
And I had to emphasize
Quality.
standards, because a lot of times, to Mr. Thompson's point, a lot of folks want to give their own business opportunities. We talked about how other cultures do it, but in all fairness, they deliver. And delivery has got to be part of the package. Quality standards has got to be part of the package. As we always like to, we wouldn't go into Best Buy or Walmart or any other place and not purchase an expensive item without a warranty.
Right.
If it breaks, fix it. And not fix it and say, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you an additional X number of dollars, when it was never built to the quality standard that was required, where it never should have broken in the first place. So that's one of the things that, as we talk about, men and women getting involved in business, we've got to be equally stated on the educational component of your business will grow if you're good. I think it's a restaurant that we go into in Chester, where it says, if we provide you with good service, tell us, or tell others. If we provide you with good service, tell others. But if we don't, tell us. Give us a chance to get it right. Listen, we'll be right back. This is a great conversation on Like It Is. I'm R. Page Smith. We will be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Like It Is. I'm R. Page Smith. We're going to go into our final thoughts on today's show. We've had a great conversation. We've talked about education. We've talked about responsibility. We've talked about trickle-down disenfranchisement and many, many other issues that contribute to the condition of being toxic poor within many lower socioeconomic communities, not just in Flint, Michigan, or Philadelphia, or Chester, Pennsylvania, but across the country. So as you think about that, I'm going to go to Pastor Keith Collins and give him an opportunity for his final words.
Well, I think that I'm excited that we're here at Philly Cam to bring these issues out to the forefront, and it's from a grassroots perspective as opposed to a talking head that's on television that people really can't see and feel and touch. We're here from the grassroots, and I think that all that has been said by the audience and by my good friend Pastor Morris, it begins with us. If it is to be, it's up to us, the people in this room, the people that are going to watch this show, the people that are in our churches, mosques, and temples. We have to become the person that we're looking for. We have to become that person. And I think that it's this type of constructive engagement, and then doing what we can. The things that we discussed that don't necessarily involve money, but they involve the sweat equity, turning the television off, reprioritizing our schedules to get more involved on the ground, where the rubber meets the road, so we can engage our society and be less, as the pastor said, be proactive, not always reacting to something, but get ahead of the curve and be that force to be reckoned with, because you have an agenda now. We're not just aimlessly wandering around, but we have an agenda.
Now, Pastor Collins, tell folks, Church of the Overcomer, Trainer, Pennsylvania, how do folks come visit you? Every time I see you, I promise you I'm going to come visit you, and you haven't seen me yet, right? So how can folks get to you?
Okay, Church of the Overcomer is located at 1010 Sunset Street in Trainer, right off of 9th and Sunset. Our Sunday services start at 10 a.m. We have a Rites of Passage program for young men, Tuesdays at 4:30 to 6:30. We have Bible study Wednesdays at 7 p.m. We also do, as I said, emergency housing. We do housing for returning citizens, and we also we do some entrepreneurial development as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the
Appreciate
opportunity.
it.
Thank you.
Pastor Morris and I, just for full disclosure, we keep it real a lot. So, I'm so glad he's on the show today. Pastor Morris, your final thoughts.
Well, I think that in lieu of the historical reality of how we got here and the reality of what there's a segment of this nation would like to do, I believe it's time for the black community to come together. And we need to come together over the issues of economics, education, and social and mental and psychological empowerment. As you know, the Voters' Right Act bill is coming up. We need to be fighting about that, looking at that in terms of how that will affect us. We need to deal with this issue of mass incarceration of our men, and we need to look at the reality of the psychological castration of our women as they're portrayed in the media as divas, and so we need to also address some issues of our own. We have to do better. We have to discipline our children. We have to have self-discipline. We need to learn to turn off the television. It's amazing that they would kill us for reading a book, and it kills us to read one now. And so we need to teach our children to read more. We need to become more educated and articulate, because we're moving into a global world. With globalization, we are part of the whole globe, and we don't want to be left out. And last but not least, we need to teach our children about STEM. Our kids need to learn about the future. I'm an old man now, and I ain't gonna be around when it comes, but I want my children and my grandchildren to be part of this future.
Pastor Morris, thank you for joining us today. And thanks to the Bethany Baptist Church members in attendance today. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. It is my sincere hope that today's conversation has helped to create a renewed awareness, a renewed passion regarding how our poor and disenfranchised citizens are routinely treated by government, as well as underscore the reality that the will of the people will be done once you make a commitment to changing the game. Change the game of disparate treatment by government. Change the game of accepting violent communities where our children live and play. Change the game of accepting inferior education. Change the game from just playing to winning. It truly is in all of our hands. However, we need to not just talk about it. We've got to get involved. We've got to be about the change we so desperately seek. We will be sharing all the information we learned here today on our Facebook and Twitter pages, including how you can contact our guests. You can catch the show every Saturday at 5 p.m. on Comcast channels 66 and 966, and on Verizon channels 29 and 30. Please support R. Page Smith's that's me, y'all. Please support R. Page Smith's groundbreaking relationship advice book that's changing the game for men who truly want lifelong, rewarding relationships. Think Like a Woman, Act Like a Man, available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and many other outlets where ebooks are sold. The link for Page's book can be found on our Facebook page. That's it for our show today. I want to again thank Pastor Curtis Morris, Pastor Keith Collins, for joining our show today and offering their perspectives on today's important topic and information regarding being toxic poor. For the entire Like It Is team, I'm R. Page Smith. Everybody have an outstanding week. This is Like It Is. One love, y'all.